Hello, welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny panel on the 27th of March 2025. My name is Councillor Moriarty and I'll be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that the participation in this meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. We're not expecting any fire alarms to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask you leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so the public are aware of who is in the meeting and the role that they are undertaking. So I've already introduced myself. I've asked the Vice Chair to introduce herself.
Helen Price, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. And if we start here with Councillor Brar and we'll work our way around the room.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Brar. I'm subbing for Councillor Howard.
Councillor George Shaw, member of the panel.
Councillor Gertsching.
Councillor Julian Teasey, member of the panel.
Councillor Wisdom da Costa, member of the panel.
Councillor Maureen Hunt, member of the panel.
Councillor Julian Sharp, member of the panel.
Catherine Bogos, Service Lead Performance Policy and Delivery.
Sophia Waite-King, Assistant Director of Strategy and Engagement.
Nikki Craig, Assistant Director, HR Corporate Projects and IT.
Andrew Dowen, Executive Director, Police.
Ian O'Donnell, Interim Executive Director, Resources and Section 151 Officer.
Stephen Evans, Chief Executive. Mark Bealey, Principal Democratic Services Officer for the Overview and Scrutiny.
Couple of members on the, couple of colleagues on the call. Do you want to introduce yourselves quickly?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Lynn Ferguson, Executive Director of Children's Services and Education.
You're on mute, Kevin.
Apologies, Kevin McDaniel, Executive Director for Adult Services, Health and Communities and Deputy Chief Executive.
Thank you very much. So I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I'd also like to remind councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I would ask you to please limit the repetition of points or questions which has already been raised by others. Where possible, put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. I will now start on the agenda items. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we received one apology tonight from Councillor Howard, with Councillor Brar attending the meeting as substitute.
Lovely, thank you very much. So, declarations of interest. Do we have any in advance? No? Any in the room? No? Lovely stuff. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. So as a starting point, Mark, we had Councillor Price submitted a request for a slight amendment, if we're going to get those on the screen. Do you want to talk us through that?
So the suggested amendments on screen. So in the draft minutes, it currently says Councillor Price suggested that the decision did affect more than one ward, with the community infrastructure levy from the proposed development going into a central pot to be spent across the borough. The decision to extend was also to continue with the project and should have been regarded as a key decision. Councillor Price has requested this is changed to Councillor Price said she understood that there are two things to be considered to be a key decision. Does it affect more than one ward and the size of the decision? Councillor Price suggested the decision did affect more than one ward, with the community infrastructure levy from the proposed development going into a central pot to be spent across the borough. The size of this decision is millions of pounds, as if the decision had been not to extend, and the implications would run into hundreds of millions of pounds.
Okay. Okay with that. And anyone else who wants to make any comments on the minutes? Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you very much, Chair. One of the items that we tried to discuss last time related to the extension of the Carla Holmes contract by 2 years. Now, you kindly sent a response out with written by myself and the monitoring officer, but I did point out that that didn't adequately deal with the issues that were raised. So I have requested that this be discussed today with 3 points to be presented. One, we discussed it today, and one we as a group consider writing to one of the previous managing directors to get his view on what might have been an unlawful action. And we also have the monitoring officer here to comment on that. So I'd like to know, because I don't believe that the information that was sent in the email you originally sent out as a response actually addressed the issue. It pointed out that there were things had been audited, but actually it sort of opened up another can of worms without dealing with this specific issue, or whether it was unlawful, whether a Section 5 agreement needed to be issued. So I'd like to know how we can deal with this.
Okay, thank you. And look, and thanks for circulating that in advance of the meeting. It was useful to have that. Just a couple of bits in terms of just correcting things. I didn't draft that communication. That was passed on. So that wasn't something I'd wrote. I wouldn't dare try to write something as important as that. The other thing, just to remind people, is that we didn't discuss the key decision at the last meeting. We discussed the process of key decisions at the last meeting, and that's part of the reason that in the meeting where there was requests to continue to get more details about this decision, I sort of pushed back and said that I don't think that was quite the right. That wasn't what we were focused on. It was on the process of key decisions. We've made our recommendations based on that, based on the discussion in the room. However, I know that you've got some concerns. So what I'll commit to is setting up a meeting with you offline, talk through those and look at the best course of action for taking those forward. Yeah.
So, Chair, are you saying that we will talk about this offline and we will then be able to consider presenting this to the next meeting of the corporate scrutiny OSP? Because I think that's what people would like.
Well, let's not assume what people would like. Let people speak for themselves on that front. But it's what I've committed to do is having that conversation. Quite happy to update people in this meeting subsequently. I'm not going to commit at this stage that it will go onto an agenda.
It's something that we will consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've
Great.
said that. So thank you. Okay, any other points on the minutes? No? Lovely stuff. Oh, sorry, Councillor Teasing.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on that last point, because I think that the minutes are not clear enough in this regard. That when we were discussing the Maidenhead Golf Club key decision process, as if I've understood you correctly, and certainly it was my understanding in the meeting, when it came to the process around the decision about the Maidenhead Golf Club, I think there were a number of people in the meeting, including myself, including I know Councillor Sharp, mentioned that we did not have enough information in front of us. We did not have the right people in the room to be able to make a judgment on that. So let's just be clear, we were not able to make I think we just said, if that is what we were being asked to do, then we should be deferring it. If on the other hand, you're saying, actually, no, this was about key decisions broadly, rather than relating to Maidenhead Golf Club, then yes, I do remember that we did indeed say that it needs to be clarified. And I think that was a recommendation you put down. So I just don't know if that could be clarified in the meeting, that that point was about the process for key decisions, not whether or not Maidenhead Golf Club was a key decision.
That's it, and it's definitely the latter, but it was context by which it was discussed. So we can look at the minutes maybe and maybe separately reflect whether that needs to be made clearer. Okay. Okay, so that's minutes. So that brings, we've got two core items to look at today. The first of which is the council plan refresh for 25-26. Caitlin, are you going to be talking us into that? So if I hand over to you, and then we'll get into a discussion with the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this report is in two parts. First is to update on progress made on the current set of deliverables for the council plan that were set up for the first year of the council plan. And then the second element will be to refresh the deliverables and the key performance indicators for the next financial year, the second year of the council plan. I will focus first on the progress update on deliverables. As you know, the council plan included this appendix to highlight how are we going to look at progress towards the aims and the priorities of the council plan, and we had in there 94 deliverables. We agreed initially that we are going to report progress on the 94 deliverables every 6 months. So the first was due as part of Q2, and as Councillor Price, the Chairman, asked when we presented Q2 last month, I said that we experienced some delays because the entire organization focused on work to get the budget approved, and then we had this a few weeks of delays. Now is the time to present the status on progress as at the end of October. I'm in a position to provide the following updates then and assurance at the end of October. 22% of the deliverables, this is the 21 out of the 94, were already completed by that point in time, and the further 53% were on track to be delivered according to the deadlines specified in the council plan. 18% or 17 were off track, but with low risk to not being delivered. So we rated them amber in the Appendix A of the report, and they were possibly requiring some reprofiling of targets, but still confident that they will be delivered. In addition, 3%, which we're talking about 3 deliverables, were off track and rated red with high risk of not being delivered, and another 3 deliverables were on hold because of different reasons. These are highlighted in Appendix A of the report. Now, focusing on what is the story behind the achievements, quite a number of them already delivered by the end of October, so 7 months into the life of the new council plan. In the main body of the report, we're highlighting some of these achievements, paragraphs 2.6 to 2.20. In here, I'm not going to highlight all of them, list all of them, but maybe to just mention one under each aim of the council plan, 5 aims of the council plan. For example, stronger governance structures and plans to improve the financial stability of the council. This is under aim 1. Securing a £5.4 million for as a grant to cut carbon emissions and improve efficiency at the Windsor Leisure Centres, which is part of aim 2 around cleaner and greener agenda. Targeted support for children and young people facing mental health and behavioral challenges. This is part of aim 3, good start in life and opportunities. Another achievement, delivery, implementation of a new case management system, Mosaic, in adult services, because we heard it numerous times that we want better technology to allow us to serve better our residents, and also importantly, to strengthen financial controls. This new system will make it easier for officers to achieve that, and this is under aim 4. And another example may be digitization as well solution to enhance our HR platform, so internal focus, this deliverable, to improve processes by making them more efficient and effective in managing our workforce. And this is under aim 5, a higher performing council as an enabler. We are commenting in the report on the 3 items that were RAG rated as red, with some risk of not being delivered in time. One will be lifetime homes in Windsor and 18 shared lives arrangements for people with learning disabilities. At the time of reporting, there were some delays experienced about governance processes and contracting and resources with our partner in delivering this. This is delivery 17 in the appendix. Another one was around engagement to review the homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. And whilst work continued and was delivered, and it's a high focus of the service to support homeless and rough sleepers, the service had to prioritize resources on other pieces of work rather than this engagement, such as the allocation policy and the temporary accommodation cost mitigation. This will be delivery D78 in the appendix. And then the last one rated red, digital migration of local land charges. There were some delays in resourcing, some challenges in terms of the resource, and some data migration challenges, system challenges. Then I will move now to the second part of the report, which is about refreshing the deliverables for and the key performance indicators for next year, for 2025-26. As I said, we're going to report on them every 6 months and on the KPIs quarterly as usual. Officers and cabinet members went through a process to rechecking the relevance of the aims and priorities in the first instance of the council plan. This has resulted in some, overall, the the assessment was that this plan is still relevant, the aims are still relevant, priorities are still relevant, and we have only made some refining or detailing some wording of some of the aims and priorities. For example, aim 1 about the council being on a stronger financial footing now makes reference to increasing resilience, because that's significant, important in that area. Priority 2.1 about clean neighborhoods mention now the investments that.
Sorry, could I ask Catherine if you could just mention the pages when we're talking about A1, because I was scrolling down to try and find them.
Yeah, so we are mentioning this. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. This is in paragraph 2.26. We are detailing this, the changes that we made, slight changes of wording to make it clear for the organization and everyone what the focus really is of the council plan. We are talking in that paragraph as well about priority 2.1, a clean neighborhood. Now mentions the investment that is planned in the budget for the maintenance activities and partnership working. Then
It's page 3. Page 3.
Page 3,
thank you. Priority 2.5 about housing availability makes now reference to temporary accommodation. It is clear that the financial sustainability of the council is vitally important to be able to continue to deliver the services, but the council recognizes the need, of course, to continue to deliver the actual services for that residents and others rely on. To address both of these requirements, the deliverables for 25-26 have been set up as follows. We have infused into the council plan the items from the financial improvement and sustainability plan, which is a high priority of the council, which was produced in response to the CIFA review and recommendations that we had in autumn. So we recognize that it needs to be a corporate focus on all the services, impacting all the priorities. Then all the aims I meant. Then we included a number of existing deliverables from year one of the strategy, which were marked as ongoing or which required a little bit more time to be achieved. We included them, so we are not abandoning them. They will still be on the to-do list for 25-26. And then we added a few new deliverables. A few, I mean, about a third of the new 80 that we are setting up for this year. Similarly, officers have looked to rationalize the number of key performance indicators that we are using in the quarterly reports. We listened and we heard the message, we need to be more focused and to be able to understand the delivery of the council plan. The new set aims to use more relevant metrics, aims to use metrics that we can benchmark more with other local authorities. And what we are doing as well, we are taking out the contextual metrics from the actual plan and we'll put them into 3 baskets of contextual metrics that your performance team will look on a quarterly basis and report back into the quarterly report only if there are significant changes in trends or the status in the district. This will be around economy, environment, and the third one, the health and social element. I would say at this point, thank you, Chairman, and I will be happy to take any questions together with my other colleagues, officers in attendance, in order to support the panel to formulate any comments or recommendations for cabinet members to consider at their meeting next week when they will look at this draft report. I must say it's a draft report still, before they finalize it in time for the council meeting at the end of April.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it the intention that this plan should be a self-standing document that we can refer people to? Or is it that it's to be read in linked with other documentation?
Thank you for the question. The council plan is the most strategic plan of the council. It will inform the direction of travel for the remaining 3 years of the duration of the plan, and it will be supported by other strategies and plans as they are being developed to make sure that they are all working in the same direction.
So what I'd like to suggest is if you take the plan as it is, not the preamble in the beginning of the paper that accompanies it, is that first of all, we use some terminology there like FISP, that there isn't any explanation anywhere for anyone reading the plan by itself what that actually means. And the other thing is that in the plan itself, it doesn't describe the financial situation we're in now compared to a year ago, because the preamble is identical to the preamble that we had for last year. And I think bringing it up to date would be useful when people are reading it as one document. So that's a suggestion I would put forward. I also have thought hard about where we're going as a local authority. And it's apparent to me is that the government is not going to rescue us by giving us masses of money to get us out of the situation we're in. From what I've read about the announcement, was it yesterday, local authorities are not going to be given lots of money. They're going to have to bear some of the cuts. And we, as an affluent area, will not benefit. So we have to have some way of looking at our plan, bearing in mind that's the situation we're in. So we're considered an affluent borough because we have a lot of successful businesses and we have residents who overall are wealthy, therefore healthier, etc. And we're not looking to say, well, how can we benefit from that? So with the businesses, I don't see any of this of looking and saying, well, all businesses now want to deliver social value. What are we doing to, I'll use the term, exploit that social value from all those businesses that we have? And we have some big head offices in this borough, but I don't see that reflected here. And I think it should be, because that's the journey we have to go along to actually fund things and make things better for our customers. So I would like to see that in the plan. And then the other is with our residents who are wealthier and healthier than the average, which is why the government are not going to give us money, is how can we benefit from that? And I think that would come from volunteering and then helping in those sort of ways. And I don't see that reflected here. So there is a section, which, what's the number? But anyway, the section that talks about working with communities, faith groups, etc. It's a long, long thing there. But all we do is say, well, we're going to do a housing strategy. And we've left out the fact that we should be doing far more than that. So 2 years ago, we invested in producing a system whereby people could look at volunteering, we'd asked organisations to say, what volunteer opportunities have you got? And then residents could go in and then say, oh, I'd like to do that. And it would be self-managed, but it's not been populated. There's nothing on there. So we have this system, but we're not using it. And I think we should be using it, and that should be in the plan. And so I'm concerned that that aspect in the borough seems to be neglected for next year, as far as I can see from the information in the plan. I'm aware there is resource issues in that particular area, but surely that's something we should be doing to get ourselves in a healthier position as the years go by. So those were two things there. Do you want me to carry on with my, okay, I'll carry on. So also in the plan, you talk about HERO, which is the internal HERO, but I don't think that's something that is widely understood what it means to members, how that relates to members, and therefore what the relationship is. And I would like to see in the coming years something about how HERO relates to members and members relate to officers. So I don't see that in the plan, and I might have missed it, but I would like to see that. Also, most of the items in the plan are to be completed in the next financial year. That's fine, but some aren't. And so you're given a target that it might be in 2 years' time. And I'm concerned that if it's left like that in the plan, then we don't look at it, I'm sure you would, but we don't formally look at it for another 2 years. And I would like to see those things that to be completed and finished in 3 years' time. We have stepping off points that are shown in the next financial year. What are the stepping off points? So I think that would be helpful. So I concentrated on business and communities for the reason I just gave earlier. And we've got a section in 1.4 about the contracts we have with our suppliers. But again, there's no mention in there of social value and extracting social value from that. And I think there should be, and I think they would welcome that as well. And for that, we will need a process set up, and we need that process. In 2.3, we have a memorandum of understanding, which I know I've mentioned in previous meetings. So the target for this is not quantifiable. It hasn't got numbers against it. It hasn't been delivered, and yet it's not ranked as red. And I don't understand that because it hasn't been delivered. It just talks about establishing a process. So I would say that that needs to be tightened up. And I feel that that's red. That's my brutal thing about it. And it talks about key companies will be approached, but what does that mean? Does that mean key in terms of they're in the town centres? Does it mean key in terms of size? Does it mean employee numbers? The type, is it IT? What, we don't know. So it's not clear what we're aiming at. And I think that would be really, really helpful. And then with the charities, as I said earlier, I think that's 5.2. And it does say strengthen partnerships with charities, the voluntary sector, businesses and parishes, health and education partners, statutory bodies, faith groups and others to enable better outcomes for residents. Absolutely. But the only deliverable is to engage with stakeholders to review and revise the homeless and rough sleeper strategy. And there's just far more. So we have a really strong community network that has been set up, a partnership, and we don't seem to be tapping into that to do that. So I would like to see that. Yes, so those are my major issues on it. Thank you.
Love it. I don't know, I mean, you can talk generally to some of those points. I've taken some notes as well, so don't worry if some of those points are missed. But does anyone want to pick up any of the particular points that Councillor Price has raised?
I'll be happy to cover some of them. So thank you very much for the feedback. Yes, I made notes as well to take back. We do cover somewhere in the report, like 2.7, what fees mean, but I will make sure that rather than using shorthand, maybe we use it across the document to be easier to understand. Hero values, yes, this is an important artifact of the culture of the organization. These are our values, and absolutely we need to make sure that they are explained. What does it mean and how do they translate in the workforce, and then absolutely for members as well. By the way, this is a draft document that you have in front of your eyes. We are still working on the introduction and the explanation of the key elements of it. So the feedback is taken, and we'll take care of that to be reflected as well. Looking at 2 years and stepping points, what we are doing here, we are saying that some pieces of work, some deliverables will take a little bit longer than 1 year to be achieved. And remember that I said that we are going to report on this on every 6 months in this public forum. Officers will look even more frequent to the progress. And each time we'll come in front of you and we'll say, this one is due to be completed in about 2 years. It is on track, is it not on track, experiencing some delays. Yes, officers will have their more detailed plans in their services, and we are trying to find that balance between giving you the overview, the high-level picture, and giving you the details. I will look into the longer-term ones to see if there is a meaningful interim deliverable for year 1 of the 2 or something like that, to see if it's beneficial to be even more focused on do year 1 and then move on and do year 2 once we complete year 1. In terms of social value, I'm aware that work has taken place in the past, in the last year and in the last few months to ensure that it is covered in our procurement and in our contracting. So I think for that reason it's not put back into the plan, because I think there is a requirement for our procurement processes to ensure they deliver social value. In terms of judging some of the rating of some of the deliverables, when we said that we are going to do a process to put in place, where we believe that we had the process in place, we mark it as done, but I think we have deliverables into the next year to work with key businesses. And I get the point in terms of defining what do we mean by key businesses. So yes, I will try to clarify that aspect.
Councillor, just before we come to you, Kevin, Councillor Price, did you have a question on the social value point?
I'm aware that in the contracts there is social value, but it's turning something that's written in a contract to actually it being delivered. That's the point I wanted to make, is that it's there in the contracts, but it's turning it from being in the contract to actually something being delivered. So that's the point I wanted to make.
So I would believe it's more about monitoring how that is delivered. You're talking about here, the social value that is in contracts. Okay.
Okay, Kevin, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to respond to Councillor Price's observations around the work with the voluntary and community sector. And I think, Councillor Price, you're quite right in your observation that the objectives we had in the last year were to set up some infrastructure, as you describe, and the goals for this next stage of the plan is to make sure they are being used and exploited by our voluntary groups and therefore for the benefit of our residents. And therefore, under strategic priority 4.2, you'll notice that the overarching aim is to review and embed stronger engagement practices, and that's to help us get the connections with those groups to build on the capacity and the willingness that you quite rightly describe. To that end, we have narrowed our particular strategic focus for the council to lead those conversations with groups that can make a difference to the lives of residents who otherwise would come under the ambit of our adult social care services, because that's our key strategic priority. Our hope is that forum will also be the place where people with other ideas and other priorities can bring forward the things that they want to do and share like-minded approaches. And you mentioned volunteers. We have a strong working partnership with WAM Get Involved to try and make sure that volunteers who make themselves available, as you've described, can work across the piece. And we know that they've successfully this year developed their volunteering passport, the idea that somebody just once needs to get a DBS type clearance and can work with a number of local voluntary groups. So I'm by no means thinking the job is done. Indeed, we've put in place the first building block we need, but you're quite right that we need to do more with our voluntary groups to give them the support. But we recognise that they also need to be willing to help themselves somewhat in that process we're setting up. Thank you, Chair.
Problem at all. So that's community engagement. Is there anything that was just probably the one that's outstanding a little bit is CSR with contractors and anything there? I mean, is there anything to discuss in that bit, or is that just something? So I think, Councillor Price, do you want to just remind us of the point on that? I made a note that there was.
Kettle out.
Oh, did that answer? Sorry.
Yes,
that's okay. Fine. If you're happy, then I'm happy. Great. Okay. Councillor Da Costa. Wrong vowel.
Thank you for that. Catherine, thank you very much for that. And if I could just pick up on Councillor Price's point and Mr. McDaniel's point, that yes, it would be useful to have an idea. I know this is balance. We don't want this report to be 10,000 pages long, but equally we would give a flavour. So the idea of having, there are items you have got planned, which sometimes extend over 2 to 3 to 4 years because they take time to implement the different stages to go through. And as Mr. McDaniels has talked about, there are other strategies which, if you like, hang off this plan. It will be useful to get an idea, at least if it's just a reference, a URL or something, so that we're aware that, you know, that there is so much more that you're doing, which it is just super summarised in this report. That would be really useful. In terms of the corporate plan, I always used to call it the one ring to rule them all, because everything hangs off it, right? So if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you'll understand that reference. Now, I understand that if we were to change this, it's an enormous, enormous upheaval. So the question is really, who makes the decision about whether the plan we have in place today is still relevant, given the change in circumstances, government funding, and a number of other changes being brought in? Who makes that decision? So I've got a few questions, which I'll ask in one go, and then I'll stop, and then I've got some specific items related to line items. So the first one is that who makes that decisions? Second question was, once an item is achieved, is it removed or is it retained in there so people can recognise and reflect on the fact that this has been achieved, tick, and great progress has been made? The third point was, I see that there are suggestions in there, new ones, which are coming from the Corporate Parenting Forum. So I've got that from my wife, Councillor Carol Da Costa, and also from the Performance and Resources Board, which is a new board. And that's great to see these new items set up, which help achieve the plan more fully. I suppose my question is, how do we as councillors raise items to go on that? I say that because I have raised items with the leader of the council, and they've been duly ignored, and they would have added value, cost nothing, and they would have contributed towards some success. So those are my sort of first four questions, which is just more general strategic questions before I look at sort of specific deliverables.
Okay, I mean, in terms of how I understand the process, and this is more testing my own knowledge than anything else, is essentially is cabinet, right? And our recommendations from tonight would go to cabinet, the cabinet decide, and then it's voted for in the council. Is that fair? Yeah, nods from the gallery. But yeah, I suppose then what that leaves then is the contribution to the council plan and the items that you talked about in terms of inclusion. Does someone want to? Yeah, you can take that up then.
So in terms of council plan items, you will see that a high proportion of the new deliverables, they are emerging from the latest developments, from the FISP, the Financial Improvement Plan, and we incorporated in there because collectively we thought that that's the most pressing issue, or part of the most pressing issue to achieve the resilience of the council financially. The other items will come from what we are doing every day, and we understand progress towards what we set up to do over the 4 years, and we measure this progress on a quarterly basis with our KPIs. We measure it with the progress update that you have in Appendix A on the deliverables that we had up to this point in time, and informs what is it that we want to do next. And in terms of opportunities for members to contribute, this is an opportunity to highlight if you believe there are any gaps. Then the conversation at cabinet and the conversation approval at council will be the opportunities to get involved. Of course, this is developed by officers in conjunction with cabinet members. So contributions as the representatives of the residents are included in the plan.
So, Chair, before I go on to my specific items, so we're saying I can make suggestions through cabinet. Can I make suggestions directly to one of the team here? Is that possible? Okay, perfect. I will do that because I've got a few which will certainly aid with funding, financing, and procurement for sure. If I can go through a few specific line items. So D86, when we look at income, we do talk about debtors, but what about the billing systems themselves? Because I know that one of my group team members, Councillor Carpenter, did talk about the fact that some pitch fees, for example, and others have talked about care home fees have not actually been billed. So what are we doing about trying to identify those areas and, you know, button them down? Next one is that when we look at effective enforcement, I mean, that's really important to residents because they look at the impact on highways and planning and terrible, you know, how should I put it, buildings which go up without planning applications. And we say, well, why aren't these being enforced? And of course, many of the enforcement will be self-funding at the very least. So it'd be interesting to see, useful to understand how we as a team can put some money into enforcement, investing to save almost. Again, we come back to one of the points I raised about an item I did raise with the leader of the council, but he duly ignored it, which is capital for green funding. So I know a number of organisations, because of the work I do with the LGA in terms of commercial and property, that there's certainly one who would love to come and work with us called Abundance Investment, who can help us raise funding, and not just even raise funding at really reduced rates. I think we talk about the PWLB as the lender of last resort because it's like a bank overdraft, and you know that's never cheap, is it? But it will also improve our engagement with residents and businesses. So abundance investment is something for capital projects, any social capital projects, but especially the green ones, which we can raise money very, very as an ongoing tap. We've talked with, I think I've mentioned to Mr. McDonald before about the financial acumen of management, and I don't mean, you know, the illustrious individuals here, but we look lower down and their ability to manage budgets and be held and say, look, okay, here's your budget. You need to identify your costs, manage your costs. So where are we with that, improving the financial acumen of management? I know that we've talked specifically about the great new systems in children's services and in adult services, but we don't have that quality of system in place. So are we going to introduce some sort of new system in place so we can get more accurate figures from the budget? For example, you know, £6 million overspend last year. We've got to find a way of improving. So I'd just like to know what's being done there. If I can stop there just for a second, then I'll go on to some specific points which relate to children and adults. So this is the point for from D76, and anyway, it's from Councillor Carol da Costa. So when we look at the inequalities and making access to specific leisures affordable, we mustn't forget that these are people, many people who have we are trying to get to, they can't afford anything. They're going to food banks, they're going to the West Windsor Hub, to Baby Bank, to a number of other charities. So really, you know, 1% of their income is £1 a week. That's what they can afford for sports and leisure facilities. So it's something we have to bear in mind if we really want to make these improve the health of everybody, irrespective of what demographic, how much money you've got. There are a few other things. I don't know whether, Chair, I should mention them now or whether they should be done in a separate email.
I was going to ask how many you've got, Councillor da Costa,
exactly,
because I'm quite keen to hear from other people as well. And
yeah, so what I'll do then, Chair, is I have got a number of powerful ones, but I won't mention them now. But I've given an example of that. We have been looking at this and are definitely, trying to help and work as a team with all of you. So I will email those tonight to you, and then you can pass them on to Caitlin and the rest of the team. Is that okay?
I'm not sure that's the right process to be.
How would you like it done?
To be honest,
do you want to go through them now?
Well, as I think has been pointed out, these are matters for cabinet members, right? It's a cabinet document. It's our recommendations in, so officers can't respond directly to those recommendations because ultimately it's a cabinet decision. So you could forward it to the lead member. Or to, I know you've talked about forwarding it to the leader of the council, but ultimately that's their decision to make in a way, isn't it?
Okay, these relate to specific items which are deliverables, which we've got there. I'm not saying new deliverables, I'm talking about items which need to be tweaked to make them more effective.
Okay, fine.
Let me email them to you.
Fine, let's do that and then we'll work out the best way to go
Councillor
forward.
Werner and perhaps Mr. Evans, and then you can take it as you wish.
Yep, fine,
Okay.
lovely. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add an assurance point. Of course, as an organization, we are here to deliver over 700 statutory, mandatory functions that we have to deliver, like it or not. And of course, a council plan will never be able to cover all of them, and it focuses on the highest top priorities. So maybe some of the items that you suggested, maybe even if they don't make it into the council plan, if they are delivered by services themselves anyway as part of business as usual activity. But yes, let's approach that.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just go back to, I'd like to just go back to real basics on this. This is the council's strategic delivery plan. And reading through this, I really can't tell which are the important strategic deliverables here. So you've got aim 1 says put the council on a strong financial footing to serve the borough. Then aim 2 is a cleaner, greener, safer and more prosperous borough. So is the main aim that we're looking at and what the council will be focusing on what is in aim 1, or is it in aim 2, or is it aim 3 or 4? Because I reading through the report, I don't know where the priorities are. And actually what this report does, it conflates current projects with a requirement for future deliverables. So, and some of the deliverables which are in the future when this report was written are actually, or should actually be, very nearly delivered now because they're stated to be delivered in March this year. So I don't know what the status of all those is, and we might get something in a few months' time. So I think just going really back to basics, if I was to give this to my residents and say, look, these are the council's aims, you can see what the council's doing, I think they would give that back to me and say, I really don't know what the council's doing. I can see they've put some words on a page and I can see that they've numbered the priorities, but I don't know which of them is important at all. I have no idea. So I'd like to understand how these are prioritized and which are the important deliverables here, because there are obviously some which you would think would be more important than others. So, for example, you might think that putting the council on a firm financial footing would actually be a key priority, and I imagine it might be, but I can't tell from this document. And actually, the way it's written, because it seems to have been written several months ago, it doesn't take into account the fact that the council has been given a loan of £103 million from the government, which stacks the debt up, and the council is saying it needs to sell off assets to repay the debt. So how is the council going to put itself on a firm financial footing, given that financial background? And that really picks up on what Councillor Price was saying earlier on. So I think it's, I don't think that we're in a state where we can actually accept the recommendations in the report, because I'm really not clear what the recommendations are or what the priorities are. And I think you should go back to square one with this report, start again, bring it back to us at the next meeting and give us a report which is actually worth reading in terms of what the priorities are and what the deliverables are and when you're going to do them, because it's really not clear what is going on here. Thank you.
Okay, just before, I think Stephen wants to maybe say something to that. So first of all, I don't think we can say take this away and start again, because that's not our decision to make. We could recommend that to Cabinet. We could say to them that Cabinet should ask for that.
Our job here is we're being asked to recommend that this goes forward to Cabinet. And I'm saying expressly, no, it shouldn't. This report is not fit to go to Cabinet. So I don't think we can do that at all. Okay. There needs to be a lot more work done on it to clarify what it is about and what the priorities of the council are, so that our residents, when we give this report to them, actually understand what this council's priorities are.
But this is a refresh of the existing plan.
Yeah,
it's been in place for a year.
This is not fit to go to Cabinet, this document.
Okay. Okay. All right then. Stephen, did you want to talk to any of that? No? Okay, fine. Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Yes, can I just, I've got a few questions. Can I ask first of all about the current plan, as it were? So the current plan that we are looking at, which is, I think, Appendix A. I know that Kathleen, you said that it was, that this, if I understood, this is to be reviewed every 6 months. And obviously the timing of this is a bit strange, because we're looking at October and where we were almost sort of 7 months in, but 5 months ago. So this is indicative that I suppose it's good to see that even that 5 months ago we'd completed 21, or about a quarter of them were already completed, and that about half of the rest, half of the total, so that would add up to 3/4, were on track at the time. But obviously, being 5 months ago, things change and things move on. So can I just ask, the first question is about the, I suppose, when we will get the almost a more up-to-date sort of, maybe as at the year end, here's how we did. Will that come before us? Will that come before Cabinet, in terms of, so that we can just see how we did? Actually, before I ask any other question, let's just deal with that question first.
Yes, thank you for the question. So I mentioned in the introduction that we are a little bit delayed with this. We wanted Appendix A, so progress update on the existing plan, to reach you and Cabinet as part of the Q2 assurance report, which you looked at last month. We experienced this delay due to officers having to focus on the budget work. I can assure you that we are working now to bring it back online, and when you are going to look at Q4 performance report, you will have both progress on your key performance indicators that are in the plan, together with the progress again, end of year status on the items that are in the current year council plan.
Okay, thank you. That actually sort of, partly it's a nice segue onto my second question, actually, which is that when I compare the current, so we're now looking at the look forward one, so the current, the 25/6 sort of move, not quite current for another 4 days, but we're nearly there. When we look at the one looking forward, and I was looking at the minutes for almost exactly a year ago, and I mean, I don't remember at the time if what we saw was, because it was a glossy version, it was a glossy plan, and it was all there. And I know that there's a slight process difference, because this is going to council. I think this is going to, the next council will be the adoption of it. And as you say, if I understand, we're a little bit delayed. But can I just ask, from a process point of view, first of all, when I look at, for example, the KPIs that we had last year versus the KPIs that we have this year, and my next question is going to be about a couple of specifics, but just the more general question first of all. We had, for example, okay, here's the indicator, and here's the specific target that we have. So it'll be, for example, we want anything up over 95%, or it'll be track and report, high is good or low is good, something like that. Is that something that we will have? I mean, I presume that those are things that should be fairly obvious in terms of it's more for us to decide, are we looking at the right things? But will we get that? And can you just again confirm sort of the timing for that? Will that be alongside when we're looking at the, at the next quarter? Is that what's going to happen?
Yes, thank you for the question. The stages of the process as follow. Right now, we are looking to set up the key performance indicators and deliverables for the next year. Once we know what these are, and they are agreed by everyone, and once we have the end of year results, we will then be working to produce the targets for the agreed key performance indicators, and they will come in front of you as part of Q1 assurance report. You'll see what are the targets set up against the new set of KPIs.
Right. So actually before Q2. So the Q2 will be the final for the year that we're just finishing. But actually before that, so it'll be the Q1 will be the more, so what's the timing? Oh, it'll be soon. It'll be soon, I guess. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Okay. Well, with that in mind, obviously it is slightly harder to judge the sort of the targets and the KPIs for this year, but broadly speaking, that it looks like they're sort of nearly there. Can I just ask my final few questions about a few of the specifics? And in particular, I wanted to focus on the KPIs, because I think the KPIs are the things that we're going to measure, and which and what I did like, by the way, I do like the fact that it was good to see where these deliverables have come from. So sorry, not KPIs just yet, but the deliverables. It was good to see that there's a good mixture of what we have now, what has come out through the FISP, and I think that was really, really important. And so thank you for doing that, to just make it clear this has come from the FISP, because there was obviously that's something that has taken a lot of time. And then new, I presume, is we've just decided ourselves that it's a new thing to do. We're not being forced to do it by the FISP, but we think it's a new thing, it's worthwhile. Okay. So can I start with I don't have any questions on the finance ones, by the way. I thought they were very, very good and very clear. And I like the fact that there were I think 9 KPIs. I quite like that. Can I just ask about the children's ones? And I've lost my page. 1 second. So the children's KPIs. I just wondered, and I suppose this is a bit of a general question. There's a lot that's new, and I think when we looked at the deliverables, there was, I think that sort of out of the 17 deliverables, I think I worked out like 5 existing, 4 from the FISP, but 8 other new ones. And when I look at the KPIs, it's like new. It's like it's a lot of new KPIs there. I mean, when I look at specifics, I can't see anything that is. There's a lot of acronyms there, like CPPOs, children on a child protection plan. Now I'm wearing another hat. I'm a school governor, so I know some of these, but it's still quite technical. Given the need to make sure that we're doing the right thing, balanced with the need to make sure that we're not trying to do everything, because we have limited resources. Is it right? Is there a reason why we have so many new deliverables there? Just wondered. I mean, is it new best practice? Is it higher focus? Is it a bit of both of those? Possibly a question for Lynn, I guess.
Yeah, Lynn, do you want to pick that up?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. I think it's a really good one. And yes, there are lots in there. I accept that, and lots of new ones. I think the first thing I'd say is that they're really designed to cover the breadth of the services we cover within children's services. I think one of the concerns I had last year was that we weren't covering the breadth of the activity that we are involved in children. So I think that was one of the reasons. But the main reason really is that you will, I'm sure, know from the DFE, there has been a significant amount of new pending legislation and children's social care reforms. And in order to be able to be, if you like, compliant and on the front foot in relation to what we know is coming online, we made the decision that we really needed those KPIs in place so we could measure progress against them and be in the front foot. So that's the key reason why we've added the KPIs that we have. If that answers your question, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you, Lynn. I think that does actually. So it sounds like it's possibly a sort of a combination of recognising what we've always done or always wanted to do, and just making sure that that it's down as a target, and so that we're not doing something that is almost just not being recognised, and I suppose getting ahead of the curve on the pending legislation. I think that's a good thing. If that's what we're doing, that I suppose that we won't come as a horrible shock and that we're not doing it. So that's I personally accept that answer.
Thank you.
I promised my last question. So just again, a specific one on the high performing council, which is aim 5. So on the high performing council, again on the KPIs, there's again, when I look at them, that there's nothing there that I'm well, it's sort of two questions. One is hopefully a simple one. There's one under digital development which says new placeholder. I presume that is something we just need to finalise what the actual, yes, okay, that's fine, finalise what exactly we're going to be looking at there. But can I just ask, in this area, and maybe in any other areas, is there anything material that we've decided not to, I didn't do a compare contrast. I think this was the only area that I didn't get onto. But is there anything material that we've decided we're not going to look at? I think I can understand children and adults and finance. I think I've looked at those, but this area, is there anything that we've decided we don't need to look at anymore?
So we have decided overall, including this area, to not look at items that we have been forever green and we're still going to be green, and we know that we're going to be green, and we'll bring them back next year if by the situation we end up changing the trend. Because remember, this is what you see here is only the tip of the iceberg, is not the entire set of measures, information that officers are looking on a regular basis. So from that point of view, I would say no.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think a lot of what I was going to say has been said. So let me just see what I can add. I've looked through the EQIA. I'll start there. That's pretty decent. That's quite big, isn't it? It's about half as big as a council plan, isn't it? That's good. I'm comfortable. There's no issues with anyone with the protected characteristics. That's good. The document is about the right size. I don't want a big 10,000-page document. I want it, if you can condense it more, it'd be better, short, concise, focused. People know what they're doing. They haven't got people walking around in circles. My only criticism is I was thinking about the business and the growth and that sort of area, and I was thinking about, could we have some KPIs there to sort of reflect what's going on? But I don't know. Thing is that there's lots of, like you said, you know, you've got loads of internal organisational KPIs, and then is it worth giving too much information, and then you end up with information overload? So, but you know, I'd like to actually have a marker where we are, where we sit, and it's good that we, you know, some areas we're benchmarking against other councils, but where RBWM is quite unique. I don't know if that would work. So if we could have something like some sort of localized sort of figures, that's just my thoughts. The deliverables, we know where we are with the deliverables. Yeah, it's quite big, isn't it? Because we've got the council plan, we're governed by this, but we're also governed by the FISP. And that in itself is almost like a council plan, isn't it? That's like a big old document as well. And then we got the new deliverables. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work over the next year. So I don't know if I do want to sort of add more. And you know, if we get all of that achieved over the next 12 months, I think that'd probably be quite a big achievement. But yeah, I don't know if you want to come back on that. Let me just see if I had anything else. Oh yeah, Councillor Sharp raised some points about the aims and the importance. And I have looked at other councils, and some councils have like a ranking system of their priorities, of what's more important. Maybe the plan, when it sort of gets finalised, maybe you could tweak it somehow in the numbering in terms of, you know, what's our key priorities, and maybe sort of have that sort of not, I don't know about hierarchical system, but I don't know, you could have a sort of numbered system there. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with the recommendation. I haven't got any major issues. I mean, if it goes to cabinet in its completed format, we've always got the option of calling in the decision anyway as a scrutiny committee if we need to. But I'm sure we'll engage with cabinet members and officers from now until then to get the final document delivered. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of hierarchy of the aims, I think we are mentioning in the text, and once we have the final version, probably we can emphasize more that aim 1, of course, it's overarching priority aim. We have infused the FISP actions into deliverables into this council plan. So we are focusing on in one place because this is so important for the organization. But everything else that is in the council plan, out of what I said earlier, the 700 functions of the organization, everything else is important for residents and for different groups of residents. So what we are trying to do very hard with the council plan is to break silo working between, oh, this service is finance and it's the most important, and this is children and young people, oh, it's most important, and this is adults, it's very important. You know, what we are trying to do with the council plan is to say these 5 aims and the 22 priorities, these are our top for attention for the 4 years of the plan. Yes, they can be slightly amended or adapted as we refresh it year on year. So for that reason, we need to think in balance if it's adding more benefit to put this one is more important than 5 or things like that. But overall, we are saying, given that the financial situation and the supporting medium-term financial plan, then we are saying that the aim 1 is somehow more important than everything else, in a sense. But a part of that, how do we say that children's services or items, priorities around children are more important than priorities around adults? We tend not to go to that degree of hierarchization. In terms of business and growth KPIs, apologies, as I said, because on many of these measures about the economic status of the district, we do not impact directly. We are supporting, influencing, and so on. We move some of these measures into the basket of measures that we are going to monitor internally, and we are going to highlight for you in the quarterly assurance reports if we identify significant changes in trend. We can celebrate and say the district, the borough has now reducing unemployment rates. We are comparing fantastic with the region, and which is quite good in the country, or the other way around. If the situation goes in the wrong direction, again, we are going to highlight it and to say that this is what we observe in the external environment of the organization. And yes, that will impact plans and activities and enabling actions that we as a council would take.
Mark, just wanted to follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, so I know Councillor Singh said at the end of those comments about potentially calling in the council plan if Scrutiny didn't like it. I just want to clarify, I'm pretty sure it can't be called in because it's been, as long as obviously Cabinet agrees next week, it's going to be referred to full council for final decision. It then couldn't be called in Scrutiny anyway. And we've got it here before us tonight to make any recommendations to Cabinet, just to be clear.
So even after the documents, even after the document's been amended, we don't have the opportunity to call in.
If that was a situation,
yeah. Even after it's been amended, you mean? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's interesting. Cheers. And yeah, thank you, Captain, for that explanation. I mean, I was just going to say, I lost my train of thought there for two conversation. Yeah, it was just, I mean, in my mind, when I was reading it, I was just thinking about more that the plan, obviously, there's lots of work that needs to be done as part of the plan. And obviously that'll be underway, but it's also about, confidence and sort of reputation and sort of, you know, attracting business and sort of inward investment. And I know all of that's there, but, you know, somebody reading the document and looking at the KPIs could see actually this is quite a good area to sort of invest and set up business. And obviously, you know, you've got the communication part that sort of stick on the back of that. But yeah, that's just the sort of area that I was trying to get at. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad to see into that there's working plans for improved enforcement policy that's going to be looked into for the next year, and that there appears to be a good range of KPIs to look at things that would be affected by that, including the Environment Agency for food premises, litter, detritus, etc. I'm getting similar complaints, as I'm sure all of us councillors are, of other measures of enforcement through the borough in different place for planning enforcement, for changes of use, and yeah, non-environmental things. There's parking, etc. We've had a lot of these KPIs were there in place, and I hope they've given good information to help inform the change in enforcement policy that we plan to do in the next year. Do we have similar KPIs and plans to help other areas of enforcement in the council that will follow? Because I noticed there's nothing in aim 5 of the plan for a high performing council that develops for the council, for the borough, sorry. Do we have those plans either? I don't see them in this plan or this update. Will it be a next update for enforcement using the learnings of this year?
I will need a bit of clarification, because if we have performance measures for
Sorry, enforcement is one of the key deliverables planned improvement, but there isn't one for aim 5, say, for the other areas of enforcement that are outside environment enforcement. Are there plans for that kind of enforcement? Because we've not got the same kind of KPIs aren't shown to us here. So are they in place, and is there plans in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it does hone in on a sort of a specific in here, but yeah, I mean, there's a variety. You're quite right. There's a variety of enforcement areas that the council is responsible for within planning, environmental health, licensing, trading standards, which, you know, those services and teams will have their own local plans and activity that's delivered against, you know, what they need to be doing year to year. I suppose with the council plan, we've not brought those into this as a sort of a focus area. I suppose going back to some of the previous points that's been made about, you know, it's very easy with the council plan to throw the kitchen sink at it. And it's just trying to distill it down to a set of aims, strategic priorities, and then deliverables that we can actually push forwards on and focus on. But that's not to say that there's a whole variety of other things that we do as business as usual and day to day that doesn't necessarily get mentioned here, but that is all really important stuff that the council delivers. So yeah, if you were to unpick enforcement, it goes far deeper and wider than what's just mentioned here within the plan. But, you know, taking on board your comment might be for us to reflect and go away just to check whether or not anything should also be added. But I think at the moment what we've got is probably sensible.
Just to kind of clarify on that, I mean, the way I look at a council plan or any strategic plan, you know, and you know, I'm used to dealing with documents like this and structured like this, is that this is about moving the dial, right? This is the stuff that's going to push on. We're not here to, this isn't the QAR and stuff. And what, you know, I suppose if there were concerns about KPIs that we're not seeing here, would I be right in saying that those are the sorts of things that would be in a QAR, would be going to cabinet from a sort of a performance review point of view, as opposed to this is the strategic document that sits above that? Okay, so So then it's a case of making sure that they are in there and we're comfortable with that based on what you have asked, I think, if that's makes sense. Councillor Bra.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. It's good to see our aims and priorities on keeping the borough cleaner and safer. Where are we with our protecting our like green spaces, parks, lighting, etc.? You know, we were going to bring these services in-house. Where are we with those contracts bringing in-house?
Within a specific area or just sort of generally?
Generally.
Generally.
Yeah, especially on like, you know, my question is increase in litter, increase in fly tipping, things like that.
Yeah, so yeah, I was actually just trying to decipher your question. I think Councillor Moriarty was sort of just asking that to understand where you're coming from. So, I mean, there are different points of reference within the council plan that sort of refers to our sort of renewed approach to contract management in the council. We've already got that underway actually in terms of a more structured approach to the way in which we re-procure our contracts through a gateway process that engages councillors and members, and also about how we deliver effective day-to-day contract management as well. As part of all of that, we are continuing to consider whether insourcing certain services is a better way forwards, because that's an important consideration when we go out to market. At times that has a place, at other times it doesn't always, because obviously you potentially bring additional burden into the authority and risk versus a contracted supplier delivering those services on our behalf. But more recently, I can think of examples within the highways contract where the highway sort of inspectors, those officers that are actually checking the works completed on our highways, brought in-house so that we have more control over exactly what they're doing. It's not reliant on the contractor assessing their own work.
This is what I like to hear.
We have an independent view. So yes, it's not something that I think we'll see for every contract, but it's certainly a consideration for re-procurement of new contracts as we go forwards.
Been previous years been cut to the bone, so hopefully we can see some improvements in those services. Thank you.
Okay, just whilst there's a little bit of a gap in the queue there, just a couple of reflections from me, and I don't actually probably need a response on them, and you'll see as I sort of go through this, three of them, they go from sort of fairly minor to more fundamental, I guess. In terms of process, I guess, and I know I'm always sort of trying to move us away from process and look at policy, but we've talked a lot about some of the deliverables that have been removed and gone into BAU. I think I've always been quite a fan of having almost like without causing too much, like a register of those so that we know they've been taken off, because, you know, we don't really hear in a year's time and someone say, why isn't that on here? And it's like, well, it's in the, you know, it's almost like an appendix. So I think that might help a little bit with kind of clarity of process and stuff. I told you that they start from minor to more fundamental. I think some of the bits, and it is notoriously difficult to write deliverables, KPIs and measurements and making sure they are specific and making sure they are clear. I accept that. I think the one that I kind of honed in on was the word resilience, because it was so sort of inserted into that initial, that sort of headline thing. And we don't really talk about what resilience actually means, you know, and it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I suppose for me, taking a kind of outcome key result kind of model look at that is like, if we want to be resilient, what does that look like? How do we know that we are resilient? You know, what are the things that we would see coming in? So I think it'd be interesting to see if there's something that we can do around that. Again, I don't need to know specifically in here, but I think more the fundamental one that kind of struck me is that during the recent budgeting process, we talked a lot about the the gap and the funding, the revenue gap and all this. And it didn't feel like that screamed out in that kind of financial section in there that, regardless of what's happened this year, there is still a kind of medium term kind of issue. And I mean, it might be that that's linked to the resilience point, so it might be that needs to come through. But I guess that was just the one thing that I kind of felt was possibly missing. I still think I think Councillor Price mentioned some stuff about business forums and engaging with businesses. I think that, key employers in the area, that kind of felt a bit lacking if we're talking about economic prosperity, but I think that's kind of minorish compared to a more kind of the funding gap bit. So Steve, you sort of half put your hand up there. Do you want to?
Yeah, so the two sections which are not here at the moment are the forward from myself and the forward from the leader. I was going to very much focus on what's changed on the finances since last year. So that's where I was going to pick up the points around, the agreement we've got with government and other things we've done to try and move this forward, and what the future is looking like on the finances. So I think that would be covered in the forwards, but I think we probably can make a reference somewhere in the upfront in the document, just recognising that we've had that agreement from government.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions, Councillor Da Costa?
Mr. Evans, I mean, you talked about the forward and a couple of items which aren't in this. And I think this sort of, when will we get to see that? And is this something that the scrutiny panel can look at before it's recommended? Because, you've talked about the elephant in the room, which is you're doing great work in terms of moving the dial, but one of the key issues is the funding, and that projected long-term requirement for another £126 million of EFS, which is what Councillor Sharp was referring to as it's one of the key issues. And when will we get to see that? Because that will be fundamentally setting the scene for the rest of this achievement plan.
So that will be in the version that goes to full council.
Right.
Okay, thank you for that. We've obviously taken lots of minutes, lots of notes. Now, Councillor Sharp, you put forward that you don't think that this should go to Cabinet, which is your view there. Just to open it up to panel, is that something that anyone wants to reinforce, support, or? Okay, so Councillor, having spoke to Mark, we'll make sure it's really clear in the minutes, so that'll be in there. But in terms of the panel's opportunity to make that recommendation, it's not going to happen today. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Caitlin, for answering those questions very diligently as well. You were very keen to jump in, even when I thought you might possibly just take a note and take it away. So thank you very much for that. Okay, that moves us on to the review of the property and future review of property and future delivery model. So shall I hand over to yourself, Andrew, to introduce before we then take some questions from the panel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give a bit of an overview, help set some context. So members of the committee would have received the papers that are going to be going to Cabinet next week on the 2nd of April. One of the appendices within there is the work that SIPFA conducted in terms of the property review as well. And as I say, I'm going to just sort of help sort of set out our approach and what sort of the key milestones has been over quite a period of time, actually, leading up to this point. So we engaged with SIPFA last year. So we wanted to ensure we had an independent advisor to review the effectiveness of property and the property company. And really the review sort of focused around and considered sort of 4 key sort of areas. So the first being the current operating model. So consideration was given to alternative models that would integrate wider property services and better support a corporate landlord approach. A review of the current joint venture contracts and service specs of the property company, sort of looking to see that that's fit for purpose and aligned to shareholder priorities. When I mention shareholder, we're talking about the council there. The agreed vision and strategic outcomes of the property's regeneration function, set within the context of the council's corporate and strategic objectives, and then different models of council-led regeneration as well. So the scope of works was really split into three parts. The first, and perhaps the most pressing, was focused around property review. So this looked at existing operational practices, business case methodology, governance, service priorities, to help the council shape the service delivery. It also spent time reviewing the existing asset management strategy and associated plan. Again, and I keep referring to this, but with the backdrop to our current corporate objectives. The second was a company review, looking at the effectiveness, as I mentioned before, around the JV arrangements, and then the third around that regeneration piece. The report itself was generated out of a range of different works. So quite a lot of that was conducted as a desktop review, but also included engagement with the executive leadership team at the council, focused in quite a lot on place directorate leadership team, spoke to cabinet members, interviews with senior managers and property colleagues as well. The final report was shared with colleagues towards the end of last year. And you'll see from the report that it outlines a number of strengths, challenges, but importantly presents a list of recommendations. And so just to pull out a couple of those from the recommendations, it spoke to a need for repositioning property functions back within RBWM, suggested within the Place Directorate, and some associated structural changes to be considered, greater attention around an asset management framework, and consideration of a corporate landlord model over time. Having reviewed the report and shared that with the wider team, we followed that with a series of workshops during December and January, just gone, and that really helped to engage and take those recommendations forwards with the team's involvement, not being done to them, but being part of the way forwards, I suppose. I think it's a good moment on that for me to say that whilst we recognise the need to take action and change the previous ways in which the property company was perhaps arranged and the way in which it was delivering or maybe not delivering necessarily on all of the council's priorities, we do have a really excellent group of staff that constitute our council's property function. And I expect much of the work that colleagues in property do go completely unnoticed by many officers and also councillors as well, because when buildings and facilities are working well, we take that for granted. But there's also large-scale projects that are continuously being delivered across the council. The property team work across our schools, as well as the regeneration schemes and the larger scale schemes that you might hear about. So the report for consideration this evening is seen as a positive response to the review, but also wider sense and feedback from our members, our stakeholders and residents. I hope the committee will acknowledge that we've listened, and this report reflects that. The independent CIFA review confirmed what many of us already knew, that the structure in place had been duplicating effort, delaying decisions and costing more than it should. So we've acted on that feedback. Going back to July of last year, Cabinet gave a very clear direction to bring property functions back in-house, and that's very much now what we're enacting and what we're taking forwards. Every operational function, staff, services and delivery will come back into the council. The company will no longer employ staff, deliver consultancy work or have executive salaries. There will be no independent decision making. Everything will sit within the council's Place Directorate. The company as it operates today will no longer exist. It will exist on paper as a technical legal vehicle to hold property assets. It won't act independently, and it will be fully governed through existing council structures. The new model will operate as a simple asset holding company. It won't develop housing or act commercially. It will hold property for the council and do so cost neutrally. The company must by law have a board, but we're going to keep that minimal whilst ensuring compliance. All decisions will be made by the council through its usual processes. Oversight will sit with the shareholder panel, which includes both senior officers and cabinet members. We've also strengthened the financial controls around this. This will also give us flexibility to hold future properties, especially those used for key workers, possibly temporary accommodation or supported housing. The asset holding company provides a controlled, risk-free space to manage those assets when they come on stream. And that is an important future priority piece for us in terms of, developing and expanding on the portfolio of properties, potentially working in partnership with others, our registered providers, for example, but having a place that those properties could sit to support us in some of the biggest pressures that we face around the housing agenda. So just to kind of summarise, this does sort of present us with a complete reset. The company, as it is today, will no longer exist, as I've mentioned. We're simplifying that structure, bringing everything back in-house, including our colleagues and staff, and protecting the council from financial and legal risk. We're doing this in a way that's robust, cost-effective, and aligned with the professional recommendations of SIPFA and also feedback from key stakeholders. I think it's just important to flag, it's not by no means the end game at this stage. There'll be continuous work to develop a business plan, asset management strategy, and as I mentioned, a corporate landlord model, but that will all take time. This will be guided and closely aligned with the council plan, which obviously we just discussed, and also our Future Shape transformation programme. This work does sit actually within the Place transformation programme and is monitored by the Corporate Future Shape Transformation Programme Board. And another important strategic document that we've mentioned already this evening, our Financial Improvement and Sustainability Plan. So it demonstrates alignment to all of those. So I'll sort of finish there. I hope this gives members of the committee the reassurance they need, but of course, I'm here to answer any questions, and we've got Chris Joyce, who's the interim chair of Property Company, and we've got Nadine online as well to support with any of those answers. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I open it up, so just two things to sort of make people aware, and then a reminder. So this is going to Cabinet next week. So this is part of our focus on getting to policy decisions before they get to Cabinet, so that we can do the recommendations in advance, because that avoids things like call-ins and things like that. So that's why we're looking at it today. What I hope to do, depending on the level of discussion that we have following, is almost do something similar to the budget paper, in which I'll try and put a summary together for Cabinet, so they don't have to read all the minutes and sift through all the key details. But we'll see how that goes whilst we're discussing it. And I think the reminder is, as we've had in other agenda items over the past few months and stuff, sort of reminders that we are also talking about things that affect people's jobs. So there are HR processes that govern that. Just want to remind people of that and make sure that we don't start delving into areas that we shouldn't, and keep it to what's in this paper and the overview on that, because this will be affecting people as well, many of whom are RBWM employees who are seconded into the property code. So it's worth bearing that in mind as well whilst we're having conversations. So at that point, I will hand over to first out the gates, Councillor Price.
Thank you. I really welcome what you have described and what you've said. And I know you've taken time to get a process in place before presenting it, and that's been the reason for the delay. So reading this was the first time that I saw what SIPFA are asked to do. And I think you explained there, but I couldn't read it in the report, exactly what their terms of reference were. And what I was surprised at, if they were going to review it, that they didn't come up with several alternatives, which they might have said, this won't work because this won't, but so the one we need to go for is the one we've got. But all I saw was them saying, this is what you do. And I'm surprised at that, with an objective body who's looking at things that they haven't considered and rejected other alternatives. And I wondered if you're surprised at that, because it seems to me, were they given the brief to say, we want to disband it, we want to bring it in-house, tell us the best way to do it. But I didn't see that that was the brief either. So I'd like clarity on that. I'll do all my bits and then you've got the list. And then the other was the list of assets and how they were valued. And they were valued by an organisation who also sat on the board and also resigned when everybody resigned at the same time. So I just want to make sure that you're happy with that valuation. And my polite way of explaining this report is to say that it's politely damning for all the things that you have said of the structure that was set up. It says the structure no longer serves the council. I would say it didn't ever serve the council. It was set up to provide housing for key workers and it didn't deliver that. So that's why I think they have been polite. Anyone who reads this can read what went wrong in how it was structured and all the things that are wrong, and they should read it. But at some point we have to move on, and you've come up with a better structure, and it's how to make sure that nothing like this can ever happen again, because this has cost the borough a lot of money, and part of it is because it was all kept secret. And we were not allowed to ask questions, the auditors wouldn't investigate it. And so we have to have more openness and transparency, which I believe this administration has. So I really think we have to put things in place to make sure nothing like this could ever happen again. So really, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just in terms of, yeah, I mean, as I went through there, Councillor Price, I tried to give that sense of sort of the scope of work and you know, and sort of what we were asking Sitford to consider. And I expect in many ways along the process, and bearing in mind we continue to work with Alex from Sitford in terms of the work that we're now doing, you know, in terms of the next phase. In fact, one of his particular specialities is asset management. So he's looking at the work we're doing around asset management and the previous work that was done around 2020, and how best we renew that and take that forwards within the existing staffing cohort, but with that oversight as well. And I think at times we've certainly discussed and considered as part of our ELT presentations and discussions about, you know, different ways of doing things. You know, would just keeping the property company as it's currently set up be the best thing? But, you know, detailed within the paper, and colleagues online might want to sort of talk about this as we go on. But, you know, scaling that down to something that just holds the necessary properties that we need, and potentially new properties if we want to create and transfer that stock into there, is the most efficient and viable way of doing that, whilst, as you've alluded to, really maximising the transparency and control and input and direction that we can have as a council. And of course, we'll do that immediately by bringing those colleagues back in house and within the Place Directorate and aligning them with those other strategic plans, but also, you know, sitting alongside our housing colleagues and thinking about temporary accommodation and all those, you know, significant pressures there, but also working with Lynn and the Achieving for Children team in terms of, you know, the needs around children and particular provisions for children going forward as well, of which property colleagues are already supporting and delivering on. So yes, I think this now distills it down into changes to the company, and then I suppose as a separate strand, the changes to staffing arrangements, which is a slightly more sensitive matter that we won't get into detail about tonight, but they're the two sort of main blocks. And then just lastly, to address your other point there, you're quite right. There was, we work with KCC in terms of a relatively local firm, but work across the south of England to conduct our valuations. The council uses KCC to do that. It's not an exclusive property company arrangement using KCC. We did at one point have a co-opted member of the property board that is a chartered surveyor and RICS registered valuer at KCC, which I believe he still works there. He no longer has an involvement with the property company board, and actually as a co-opted member didn't have a voting right as part of that. He was there as a local voice and sort of formed a balanced board as it was deemed necessary at the time. So I'm really confident that the work that KCC do on our behalf is exactly what we need and how it should be. And of course, it's all regulated by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in any case. So that gives us that level of reassurance. Thank you.
Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to preface this by saying that look, I come from a contracting background. I spent many years in the senior executive for the Suez Group. So we understand TUPE and those issues surrounding acquisition or transfer of operations and risk reasonably well. The CIPFA report, thank you very much for initiating that, because it's very powerful and it raises a number of issues. I mean, it clearly points out that the original structure did not work. It did not serve our residents. It was costing our residents £1 million a year and had some fatal flaws within it, caused operational issues, how should I put it, with both, with our existing officers, which were very uncomfortable and not conducive towards good management. But one of the fundamental problems for me is that the original structure lacked transparency and we had an inability to scrutinise it. It was also a gravy train. Now that aspect is gone with the new structure, and that's excellent. Our residents will be pleased to hear that. But the board is still an issue because it seems to perpetuate the lack of transparency, accountability. And it doesn't seem to help scrutiny by us, by council, by members. It seems to leave it to an elite group of people, which that's a concern to me. That's one first point I want to make. Second point I want to make is that the CIPFA recommendations, and I'm sure they didn't make these lightly, but were with great expertise and couched in the usual sort of language. So they've recommended 9 items, 6 which are explicit, but also on page 6, they also talk about seeking legal advice on the dissolution of the property company. Page 6, they also say consider terminating the leases. And on page 8, they also talk about recommending a rationalisation model. So these 9 clear recommendations, which I don't see explicitly mentioned in the report. And I really would like to see those 9 items explicitly stated in the report. If not, at least a reference so we're clear which ones are being accepted and which ones are not being accepted. I think that's really important given the assurance report, or rather the comment you've got from CIPFA. So that's the second point I want to make. The next point I want to make, I just want to introduce you, going back to the fact that when we have a business plan, there's going to be a cost of acquisition of setting up this new entity. There's going to be new officers, new skill sets, which we don't have, which aren't coming across with the TUPE. So there's going to be the costs of bringing those employees on, pension fund, any form of redundancy payment, management time from you officers, to actually deal with those issues. This is going to come at a cost, not just with that plus termination fees and legal fees. We've asked, CIPFA have said we've got to look at taking legal advice. So this is a cost, a big cost, okay? So that means that from my perspective, we absolutely need a business plan, and I would like to see that business plan to say, okay, even if it's at a high level, it's something you've considered and it adds value to the council going forward. And the point I'm coming to now on that issue of the business plan and the cost is that I don't think, especially given that markets are uncertain in terms of property valuation, what's going to happen in terms of landlords, in terms of the amount of money that the government might make for social rents or for which we are allowed to which residents can take a benefit of. Risk. there's cost plus risk, and I'm not sure that, and I don't believe a cost neutral model is the right way forward. I think a target return really should be set. Otherwise, we're exposing ourselves to a risk which we cannot mitigate at all, unless it comes out of our general reserves, which we're partially short of. So that's my next point. Is that I don't think it should be cost neutral. I think we should be thinking about setting up a return, a relevant return. You recommend it, but it needs to be there. And then the final point, coming back to the concern about transparency in the board, is that we members are responsible for scrutiny. We're here to help you guys out. But if we can't see what's going on, or even worse than that, if we don't understand, because these are complex issues. My background is finance, tax, and climate change, and those sorts of things. So this is not my forte, yet I'm on this board. So we need an element of training. It would be great if CITFA could come in and do some face-to-face training with the current members and make some sort of other training available online for when we are replaced, so that people can effectively understand the issues that we need to be asking questions about, because we're here to obviously help you, but also protect residents. So those are some of my concerns, which would prevent me from agreeing to this report. Thank you, Chair.
Just before we go in, I mean, there was some training. There is some, just a thought there on that last point. Is it the LGA? Councillor Price, you did some training on scrutiny questions, didn't you?
Specifically about this property aspect of it. When you look at the management structures and the complex interaction between a market developing political situation, as well as the management models and the assets you've got, that's a very particular type of expertise. It's not about just the general training that we're given on scrutiny. So the CITFA report was a fantastic report. It goes through a number of, not just a recommendation, but a whole bunch of styles, talks about the asset management policy and strategy. And again, we need to be able to scrutinize that, rather than saying, oh, we can trust you, blindly. And that I don't think is acceptable. So that's what I mean by training, and to help panel members now and in future scrutinize and be able to say, yeah, you guys have done such a great job. Or to point out areas which we were looking at again.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we can pick that point up, I suppose, but I was working through my head there. If you're referring to moving forward, like as in ongoing, if this is coming in-house and therefore it's going to fall under a scrutiny panel, I mean, parts of that will be place, right? Yeah, that'll be the place scrutiny as opposed to corporate. But no, take the point on training. I can't have enough training as far as I'm concerned. So, got that point. I think that the point on the board's quite useful, actually, if you could sort of elaborate on that, the sort of how has because I understand about it becoming a legal vehicle almost, but then therefore it has to have a board and stuff. But what does the remit of that board, has it altered, changed? What does that look like? And how much of the decision making sits underneath it and outside of it, I guess, is quite important as well from a transparency point of view.
So 5.3 in the report sort of features details there around the board structure, the sort of regularity of meetings, and the council's shareholder panel as well. So I forget when we instigated a shareholder panel exactly, but it, certainly in more recent time, we've put a lot more energy into the shareholder panel in terms of having that arrangement that involved both elected members, but also senior officers at the council to give it the sort of necessary oversight that we were perhaps missing before. And that actually some of the progress that we've made in recent time has been through discussions that we've had with elected members of those particular portfolio areas and ourselves to redirect some of our attention and priorities and resource to sort of projects and schemes like St Edmunds that's sort of now up and running with 14 units of temporary accommodation, for example. And it's been through that oversight and that sort of tighter management that we've been able to realise that. I know Nadine's joined us online now. Her particular sort of specialism is company governance that's sort of fed into this work. I mean, the board structure changes. Again, it's detailed there in terms of the streamlined board for the asset holding company in terms of its sort of size and scale, with a chairperson, 2 additional non-execs, and a council exec director. But I might just ask Nadine to come in, Chair, to mention anything above and beyond that.
Yeah, Nadine, yeah, do you want to add to that?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for letting me join. In terms of the governance of the new asset holding company, we are looking at a very streamlined board where it will be made up of council officers, and those council officers will be reporting directly to the shareholder panel, which is made up of senior officers of the councils, mostly ELT and cabinet members. And the decisions for the company will be made by the shareholder cabinet and or the panel. And if that needs to go forward through the normal council processes and constitution, those decisions will follow that process.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadine. Yeah.
My question on who's going to be scrutinising it from the general council laws. I'm not talking about the lead members because they are a grouping in themselves, but the whole council needs to be scrutinising this. What mechanism is there going to be for us all to be saying, these are your decisions, we think they're great, or we think, no, actually, that we need to reconsider this? I think that's really, really important, and it's not present in the board structure as we've got at the moment. What you're saying is that officers will be guided by officers and lead members. Well, that's not us. Yeah, so I think that's vital.
The decision making will go through the normal council channels.
Yeah, so, you know, I think we shouldn't try and separate this too far beyond other working practices that already exist within the council, whether that's, you know, if we think about adult social care, think about children's services, all the things that we do as a council, this is very much now forming part of that wider governance arrangement that the council undertakes. So if you think about the council plan and the financial improvement sustainability plan, we've already explained with the council plan how that's monitored and reported against through the council's governance of cabinet and other means to council. The financial improvement sustainability plan, for example, has an independent board that's now formed and sits around that and is helping to monitor and guide that. Councillor Moriarty, as chair of corporate ONS, has mentioned place ONS in an earlier remark, and I think the place overview and scrutiny committee is an ideal opportunity when, you know, sort of further work around corporate landlord model or the business plan comes forwards, that we will want to test that new plan and policy with place ONS. So I think the structures are already there within the council that are used for all the other business that we deal with. This forms part of that as sort of something perhaps that's maybe been dealt with slightly separately because we had the creation of a arm's length tech or property company that perhaps was a little bit less transparent than we wanted before. But then now this coming back into the council just becomes very much part of that routine governance that we'd undertake.
Decisions, before they are approved by the board, will be scrutinised by place OSP. If you're saying that, then I can vote for this, with the exception of the issue of the cost neutral and the recommendations of SIPFA.
Just before you answer that, in fairness, that doesn't happen now with other decisions, does it?
Sorry?
That doesn't happen now with other decisions, don't come through corporate O&S. I mean, reports might that contain decisions, but not specific decisions.
I'm looking for scrutiny.
Yeah, I think.
And I'm saying, I'm asking whether or not, okay, I may have worded that a little bit too particularly, but I want to make sure that decisions that are made by that group of people who are not us, not the members generally, can be scrutinized by place and will be scrutinized by place. And then there is a mechanism, because it's an independent board, perhaps even a legal company with legal shareholders who are responsible, not us, that there is a mechanism for feeding back so that those shareholders and those directors can therefore act on recommendations of this council.
I think just to add to Andrew's point as well about the kind of scrutiny that we can do with the property capital, this arrangement going forward, is if there is an area of concern the place panel want to look at, that can be scoped out. We can do that with Andrew and Chris and other officers and make sure that's brought to the place panel. But we can't go through every single decision which is going to be taken at the board and bring that to scrutiny. That would be, you know, we're having a meeting every week to discuss that if we were to.
That's a very fair point. Let's put it another way. Perhaps this can be an item that's brought to once a year to the scrutiny panel as part of the forward plan.
But I think what we're saying here is that if scrutiny is there to scrutinise policy, and in this panel we scrutinise corporate policy, which falls into structures, HR, data, IT, whatever it might be. What we're saying here is that the operation, the performance of, and the decisions around this part of the council. Is it all right if I just finish the sentence? So around this part of the council would be scrutinised as other areas of the place directorate in the place overview and scrutiny panel. So the scrutiny is there.
Scrutiny will be applied to this group, despite the fact that it's got a separate legal entity, despite the fact it's got separate shareholders and directors, then I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Ian, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I mean, this is a point that I've encountered in relation to a number of different council companies in different councils around the country. And the worry is that the council should have sufficient control over the activities of that company to ensure that it does deliver the outcomes that it's commissioned. And the role of scrutiny in that is, in my view, to hold the executive to account for making sure that that is what happens. So, you know, what will normally happen is that a company will produce a business plan. You know, it may be appropriate for a scrutiny panel to quiz the executive about what have you commissioned? Is this correctly reflected in this business plan? Are you confident that this company is going to deliver what you've commissioned? It's not normally the case that you would need to speak directly to the company, because the point is you're holding the executive to account. The executive's role is to hold the company to account. And it is quite difficult and confusing to get your head around the way that these things work. But that's the best practice process. So what I would expect is that the place scrutiny panel would decide whether it wished to look at that business plan, and it would have the opportunity to ask officers and ideally cabinet members about that business plan, what they've commissioned, will it succeed?
Just to follow on one of the points though about the detailed business plan, I've seen the report, it says that's to follow. Do you have timings on that yet, and what the mechanisms, will that go to cabinet? I know there's a few moving parts at the minute, so it might be difficult to be specific, but.
There are a few moving parts. I mean, I think that will be the next iteration of work as we get into sort of, if I can use seasonality terms, so kind of the early part of the summer probably sort of a June, July time, because as part of the approval next week, in terms of the company changes going to Cabinet on Wednesday, we aim to complete all the staffing changes by the beginning of May. So that's an important focus at the moment, which is why we're suggesting around June, July time as sort of the more detailed work around that business plan. And as I've mentioned quite a bit about asset management and the asset strategy as well, that's also a really important piece of work for us to review, refresh and bring forwards equally. So again, the asset strategy would be a really good document for whether it be Place ONS or here at corporate to provide some overview and scrutiny of in terms of how we're managing, delivering, optimising, perhaps releasing our assets in the future and how they are made up. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Councillor Teasey, thanks for your patience.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. So I've got broadly 2 points to make and 2 questions to ask. So the first point is a very general one, which is that it's really to sort of congratulate officers to get on getting to this point, because I think this is a tangible achievement that has been made here, and this is a real sort of mark in the sand about something that has been really improved, that was clearly not working, and the SIPFA report puts it there in black and white. This is all the way back in. I think we realised very early on that this is something that needed looking at, and the SIPFA report from September, as has been said, confirmed what we knew, that it was expensive, that there was duplication, that it was opaque, that the decisions were, and we know this from, as a ward councillor, I know that this is certainly one thing that wasn't working. It said that the service lacks operational capacity in key areas such as service and landlord and tenant services, and we know this. We know this from just being a ward councillor and having to sort of pull our hair out at getting decisions to be made. So it's really, really good that this has we're now moving forward, and I know this has been a long and difficult thing to get to this model, which has led to legal questions, etc. And that's my second point, is that I can understand why we've gone the route we have in terms of actually having this as a sort of an asset holding company rather than getting rid of it, which was one of the thoughts before. And I suppose the point to be made is that right to buy does appear to be one of the key reasons for that, which is really, really, in my opinion, short-sighted policy that is still there, that is still a government policy that is one of the main reasons why councils don't have the money they have, because there's no capacity that every time you have an asset, it's like it depletes the assets that we have. But that's enough in the points. So I've got 2 questions. The first question is it goes back to the oversight and the in terms of the shareholder panel and the overall governance. Now, I think I get, and from the points that have just been made, that so tell me if I'm wrong here, that operationally the decisions are taking in-house. There does have to be a board. There does have to be a statutory board, because there's a company, there's an asset holding company. But I can understand, I can see where the how that will be a lot more clear and very much in-house, as with a lot of other services. And I'm seeing nods, which is good. There's just been some questions on scrutiny. My question is related to that. I see that there are quarterly board meetings and only other meetings where necessary to reduce overheads, which is fine. But then in terms of oversight I think there's an annual budget and a quarterly report, quarterly financial reporting. Very simple question. Will we, as councillors, as opposed to the cabinet, will we as councillors get some oversight of these, which will allow us to see what is in, you know, to see these after the event? Will that happen? Actually, let's just ask that question. My other question is a very specific one.
I think the answer is a yes. We were just having a momentary sort of thought there about how best to demonstrate that information back. Yeah, as you say, Councillor Teasey, once it's sort of gone through the process. I mean, the QAR is a potential source of you know, monitoring and reporting that we could look to use. That we're obviously you know, we've widened over time to include other things. I think our savings reporting is going to be part of that wider suite of reporting going forwards into next financial year as well, to demonstrate a closer alignment and grip on the progress we're making against efficiency savings. So I think we will be able to do that. It's probably one for me to take away with the team and just sort of have a discussion with colleagues alongside me, just to sort of agree what the best way of doing that. But I'd like to say, yes, we will ensure that there is that level of transparency, so a wider group of councillors can get access.
Yes, I think you've understood the point that I was trying to make. As for how, you know, that there are lots of ways to skin a cat, as it were. But yes, I think the key thing is that one of the key improvements here is we want to have sort of a bit more simplicity, cost efficiency, faster decisions and transparency. And I think we've achieved all of those things, but I think on that transparency, we just need to make sure that that it is genuinely transparent, and that not only is there sort of officer oversight and cabinet oversight, there's also councillor oversight and sort of scrutiny oversight as well. Okay. Second question is just a specific one. Sorry, where is it? Yes. So in terms of the business and 4.9, which is quite long, 4.9 in the long-term strategy, one of there's a subheading saying what's not included in the business plan, and the first bullet point says that new property acquisitions will not be included. The AHC will focus solely on managing existing council-owned assets. Simple question: is there a reason for that? I mean, is that a well, we're not planning to do it for now, but maybe in the future we might, or is there a specific reason why we don't want to do that? I'm just thinking, let's say hypothetically that we do have a number of other, you know, somehow we acquire a number of assets, however we do. If there is a sort of, on an operational level, I guess the people will be now in-house, so the people will be the ones who manage those things. But is there any reason, either legal or tax or other reason, why we're not planning to add to that?
I think really it's to give a clear sort of direction in terms of our plan not to be in the market of that type of delivery. But you raise an interesting point, and I think it's worth us taking away and considering. Actually, what if the opportunity arises whereby we want to use that vehicle to expand in that way? So I think it's probably something we just need to sort of take away, because it's quite black and white in terms of that, and perhaps we need to just sort of provide ourselves with a little bit more flexibility to perhaps consider that going forwards if an opportunity was to arise.
Fine, because I wondered if there was an obvious sort of, oh, it's for tax reasons, oh, it's for legal reasons or something. But if it's just an operational thing, then maybe, yes, that might be a suggestion to take away, that maybe just grey that black and white thing, just to allow the flexibility going forward, maybe.
Councillor Hunt.
Yes, thank you. I can certainly concur with Councillor Teasey on the need for transparency on this. We've got rid of one company there was very, very little transparency. Well, I didn't have any. So we do need transparency with this company. Now, this company is set up for, and I can understand why, for a handful of properties. You know, there's 16 properties here. And those officers who will be utilised in this company, can you tell me if they will also be utilised, same officers, for all the other parcels of land and buildings that we own, the council own? Because I know we have quite a big portfolio. And at the moment, that wasn't in the previous company. That was just run by the council and run by Place. So can you tell me if it be the same officers, or are we going to use different officers, duplicate the whole thing? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the initial plan, Councillor Hunt, is very much a lift and shift. I think we mentioned earlier that there's a mix, or there's an existing mix of property services colleagues that were seconded to the property company, and then property company directly employed staff. So that's the process that we're working through at the moment. It does contain a degree of sort of sensitivity around the correspondence and the engagement with those members of staff, but that involves very much the same colleagues in terms of the lift and shift. However, the role and remit of them going forwards is something that we are looking to change, because I think we've recognised, SIPFA have, but very much we did from the outset of this work, that we need to change the focus of the property function to align better with the things that we really need them to deliver on, which you've mentioned sort of some of the broader assets there. It might well mean a greater focus on some of that. We do have some vacancies within some of the roles within the property services division as well, which we'll need to recruit to. And going forwards, you know, I can see a great emphasis on supporting those wider pressures that we see in housing and temporary accommodation and social housing as well, and seeing if we can unlock some opportunities, whether that's with the £2 billion that was announced earlier this week going forwards, whether it's looking at the way in which we currently utilise those properties that are within the asset holding company. You know, how are they used currently? Is that the right way? Is there something different? But it's also really pushing forwards on some of those vacant assets that we have, because there are either existing office blocks and or derelict properties that are in existence, and we want to see them come back into use. And we probably haven't given them a great deal of focus up to this point. And that's really what we want our resources sort of pointed at and delivering on. So there will be that shift. And you know, in terms of roles and remits and individuals, that's just something that we'll work through over these next few months.
Thank you very much. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking first, like this item should have come first before the other one, because the action point on the other council plan was this was one of the action points to deal with this. But anyway, yeah, look, this property company, I mean, it was all good intentions, I suppose, when it was set up in 2011. We had acute housing shortage. It was set up to deliver social and key worker housing for the borough. Somewhere along the line, poor leadership, I'll put it down to. I mean, that was 4 leaders ago, and subsequently there was issues. The machine ended up milking the borough. It milked the borough of land, and money. I mean, it was a gravy train. I mean, there was so much going in there. There was a black hole. There was nothing coming out of there. No houses. I mean, I think I delivered more key worker houses in 1 year than this company ever did. There was chief, the section 151 officer said it. I mean, you know, this company, we should have controlled the actions of the company. The executive should have controlled them. And we didn't. We failed. So that was previous administrations. So it's very late. It's very sad to do this. But the company's not working. So we've got to shut it down. My only thought is, it does fix the mess that we've got there at the moment. But my only thought is, we do need to think about long-term strategy. We've still got a housing need. You know, had this company delivered back in 2011, the amount of land we had, the amount of money we had, we would have had a good stockpile of social and key worker housing. We got to think about the future, and you know, if we can deliver some property, that will help. You know, we've got 300 odd families in temporary accommodation at the moment. So anyway, that's probably conversation for another day and another scrutiny panel. But yeah, I support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Just got a couple of quick questions, transparency wise. So we've got our very minimised board, which is clearly one of the main aims of this change, which is good. If in the future, the say number of the board or composition of things, the structure of it changes, will that be a decision by the company? Would it be a decision by the shareholder panel, or would it be a scrutiny or council decision?
It will very much be that the shareholder panel that will consider those changes of the asset holding company governance. Yeah.
Okay. And it says that all these shareholder panels will be minuted and shared. I assume that's within the shareholder panel. Will those minutes be available to councillors, say, at a later date, or?
I mean, the first point, yes. I mean, in terms of how much further they then travel, I don't think that will be by a matter of course that they would be shared more broadly than that shareholder panel.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose I'm trying to just contextualise myself whether I'm comparing it to say NHS governance structures where you've got the panel governors looks after the NEDs, which look after the board, and in this case they're effectively the non-executive directors that we don't get to see their decisions, but we still will grill them, I suppose, afterwards, but we can't actually look at their internal these meetings.
I think your question's helpful, councillor, because I think what this does is just helps me to kind of go back a little bit and just reflect on the conversation that we were having about the sort of the current properties that are included within the property company that will go to the asset holder company. And I think when we talk about assets, it's very easy to kind of think about all of the assets that we're responsible for in the local authority. So the property company as it stands includes that list of residential properties that was one of the appendices to the report that you've probably seen. So those are the ones that will be held and retained within the asset holding company. Everything else in terms of staffing and arrangements will be transferring back into the council in terms of people. And then, of course, Town Hall, as I look around the room here, and other assets that we own and we manage as a council will continue in the same way that they currently do. The really important piece of work that we need to take forwards is that asset strategy piece that I mentioned, that some really good work was done around 2020 on that, actually. We are in a process of renewing that and refreshing that, and we'll be bringing that forwards as a decision piece, which, as I've said, I think it's a really good sort of scrutiny piece, because it's an asset strategy around buildings and premises that everybody's probably got quite a lot of interest in. And that will demonstrate, you know, how we intend to perhaps optimize those buildings better, use them maybe for different uses, maybe sell some. You know, we've got Reform Road as a paper going to Cabinet next week as well. So at times releasing those assets might be the preferred way forwards, or looking to generate a greater return on the rental income that we generate from them. So it's important just to distinguish there the residential properties that are held within the AHC and those that are within the council's role and remit as they currently are, and the fact that what's left there is relatively modest and small, but gives us the flex and opportunity if we did want to create or transfer additional properties into that arrangement, we could do. But ultimately the staff and the executive leadership team that have control around what goes on is within the Directorate of Place. So that's very much within the council, which is the insourcing piece that Cabinet gave us a very clear steer to deliver. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The only thing from me, it was actually when I was reading the SIPFA report, as I was sort of rattling through it and going through the words, I got to a section where it said, property could reside in several directorates within the council. Most common across local authorities are to embed property in either place or resources. Fine. And then it said, if the strategic value of the property team is to enhance the role of place shaping and to support the creation of communities, et cetera, then it would sit in place. If the strategic value of the property team is to generate an income through maximising the commercial and investment assets, then it should reside within Finance Resources Directorate. And as I read those two paragraphs, I went, oh, so that'll be Finances and Resources based on some of the stuff we said in corporate plans and stuff. And then I went, oh, hold on, no, it's yeah. I sort of understand what it then goes on to say, well, actually, because commercial investments is already in place, that's why it cut. But was there a conversation? Was it kind of discussed? Because it was a SIPFA recommendation. It, you know, to a point earlier on, there was a series of recommendations. Was it discussed, or was it fairly cut and dry based on the current structure and how it fit within the current structure?
I mean, it is something we discuss. I think the first day that Ian joined us, I think we talked about the property company and the work that we're doing around it, and maybe sort of the future direction of travel. In fact, before I became the sort of senior responsible officer, as the sort of client side to the property company, that was actually with the director of finance at the time. So you know, my time here, I've seen that sort of switch between, and you know, not just because we're sat next to each other this evening, but you know, place director and finance and resources director naturally need to work very closely with one another, and the associated teams and departments do, because of the values and the monetary activity that happens within holding properties and managing assets. So it is something that we consider across the LT, and that's where, when we've had presentations from SIPFA or ourselves having consideration and debate around this in the future direction, that's been picked up. So quite confident and comfortable of the direction on that. But thanks for asking.
Okay, got no more. Yes, Councillor Da Costa.
Not been on this panel before, and obviously we're looking at perhaps a recommendation to the Cabinet. So we've agreed, and it's been a great discussion, approve of everything you're doing. So we've agreed a few things, and I just wanted to check which of these need to be re-reflected in the report that's going to Cabinet. So we said scrutiny is going to be by place, makes sense. That there'll be specifically training for panel members on that related to the property training. That the one thing you're going to go away and think about is going to be possibly the acquisitions policy and how that might develop. So is that going to be something that's reflected in the new report? Another thing in terms of transparency was you mentioned quarterly reports. going to have a business plan. Clearly, that's really important as we look to make the transition. And then the asset strategy, which obviously is and return strategy. So these are things we've agreed we're looking at. Are these going to be reflected in the revised report to Cabinet, or do we make that recommendation to Cabinet that they should be included?
Yeah, so it's the latter bit. So our role is to recommend to Cabinet anything that we're concerned about within a paper or anything in a policy that we think they need to take into account. Ultimately, it's Cabinet's decision, not ours. We're there to...
We're making those four recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. So we do that in two different ways. We highlight in minutes in there, and that's what we've done traditionally. It does put a lot of onus on Cabinet members reading the minutes. So what we try to do, and what I try to do, is trying to give a sort of overview of that and point people towards specific minuted items.
Okay.
So we'll do that and make sure it's come in, and then the opportunity there is to even attend Cabinet if you want to reinforce some of the points specifically.
And can I just say thank you to Nadine, Ian, Andrew and Stephen and team, because we're giving you a bit of a hard time, but we appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, sort of jumped in a little bit on what I was going to say. I think having listened to it, there's specific items and we can pick those bits up. But the thing I'm hearing the most, and I think the thing that speaks loudest, that we just need to iron out, and I think this is what I would say to Cabinet, is that whilst a lot of the issues that were highlighted in the CIPFA report were operational, duplication of effort and all the rest of it, I think that's quite clearly kind of a straightforward lift and shift as you described it, is making sure we don't repeat the transparency issues. I think that's what's come through on this. So I think Councillor Shaw's working example was a really good way of testing that as, almost an example of a decision. Well, where would that pop up? And there were some points there that Councillor Teasey raised about finances. So as this develops, it'd be great to sort of almost stress test some of those elements and just make sure everyone's comfortable with those going forward. So that's the kind of gist that I will put forward to Cabinet as well, just for them to have a watching brief on that as well. Okay, thank you very much. So that is the item 4. So five. Sorry, number 5. Don't want to go back. I go forwards. So that brings us to working plan. Now, there's two things that I want to say before I'd sort of open up to any comments on this. First off, May's quite a busy agenda at the moment. So there is the election of the chair and vice chair process next. Quarterly assurance report, approach to consultations. That was something that we wanted to do tail end of last year, but we delayed it for a couple of reasons, to get a few things ironed out and finalised, but also we had budget and big things coming through as well. So that's coming through. So as consultation champion, I'm looking forward to seeing a kind of overview of some of the good work that's gone on there. The other thing, Councillor Da Costa, will pick up with you in terms of work programme and the agenda item that you mentioned. See what the best way forward is that, and we'll update the group. The other thing is as well, just to let people know, I've been sort of reflecting on the sort of items that we bring to this Cabinet. I've been talking with officers who had some views on how we can improve that. I've spoken to Councillor Price as Vice Chair with some ideas, and to Councillor Werner as Council Leader. And something that I will pick up with you either individually or as a group separately, but it might shape if you've got any items to raise on this item, topics to raise on this item, is trying to shift us away from a kind of operational review of performance, because that mechanism already exists with the Cabinet. The QAR goes to Cabinet quite often before it comes to us. So there's a kind of lagging approach to what we do. So I'm working with a few of those parties that I mentioned a moment ago to start looking at how we can start bringing some really substantive policy items to this. And the policy items we'll be looking at is corporate policy. So that will be elements of HR, elements of IT, and sort of budget development, finance. So we're going to be working on that and start pulling through some ideas. As an example, I did notice on the Cabinet forward plan that there's a sponsorship and advertising policy that's been developed, and that strikes me as a really sensible one to flow through this group as a bit of policy development as well, because it's relating. Oh, sorry, I'm not close enough to the mic. So advertising and sponsorship policy that's being developed. So that seems like a good one for us to look at here because it's relating to corporate activity. So as an example, sorry, I was sort of retreating away from the mic there as the hour gets late. So that's just, I want to set that scene, and I'll be coming. I feel like every time I talk about work program, I always make a promise that I'm going to do some work, and then I come back and make another promise about doing some work, but I promise I will do it this time. But just on that, is anyone want to raise anything in the work program? Councillor Teasing.
Apologies for the late hour, as it were. I think that what you've said is sensible. I do sometimes find this can be a very good committee. It can also be quite an unwieldy committee. We seem to want to boil the ocean sometimes in minute detail. If we can be more focused, that's good. One idea that just to sort of almost maybe end the night on, which is somewhat controversial, but I understand that some other councils do it from time to time, is that we have at the moment just us councillors, the sort of backbenchers scrutinising, and we have the officers in front of us. The one group of people who we don't have are the cabinet. Now, far from me, I mean, we don't want, or it would be unfair to bring them all here, but potentially, for example, you know, we have three overview and scrutiny committees, and from time to time, on a rolling basis, in a way to be determined, it might help us especially if we're asking about policy. There is a, you know, the officers do, but it's the cabinet decide. And it does make sense if we're trying to scrutinise and understand, well, why are you trying to do these things? What are you trying to achieve? I think that would hopefully be a useful addition and might really make it a really good committee.
I totally echo those points, Councillor Teasey. So I think that's conversations with you know, I'm always asking for advice. I mean, that's the thing. So I'll talk to people who do this a lot and all the rest of it. And apparently we're quite unusual to not scrutinise cabinet members as a local authorities. So it's quite a common approach. So certainly want to do that. On that topic as well, as a kind of a little bit of a slightly meta topic, one of the potential topics we could scrutinise is scrutiny. And that might be a way of us making sure that scrutiny, and it actually talks to some of the points we've raised tonight, specifically to the PropCo, but it's, you know, making sure, are we structuring scrutiny right? Is it done correctly? Is it done efficiently and effectively? And that's, you know, learning from other local authorities, learning from people that, you know, what best practice is, who knows? So yeah, totally, I'm on board with that, and I have made that opinion public to the right people as well, to sort of say, hopefully we could be joined by some cabinet members in the future. I think the thing, actually, just the one point to emphasise on that as well, your point about how you can't have the whole cabinet here. I think that's also what I want to try and do with this panel, is that when we start talking about council plans, that we kind of get into policy areas outside of here. We've talked tonight about, well, place should be looking at the place policies. It means that, you know, for instance, Councillor Wilson, who's got a very kind of corporate focused portfolio, right? You know, he won't thank me for, he's going to be coming, he thought he goes out of this panel, but he'll be coming back before he knows it. But there are sort of specific lead members that would lend themselves to these sort of policy areas that I hope that we can start getting tucked into in the future. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Councillor Price.
Yes, when the council plan is approved, I think it's worth us looking at that to see what different areas of policy are being created, and to see whether we could work alongside that if it's appropriate. We can't do it all, but we might take what we think are the most important things.
Totally agree. Well, everything should hang off it, so it seems like a good document to look at in the first instance. So yeah, we can do that. All right. There we go. We're 2.5 hours. So thank you very much. Thanks to officers for joining us tonight. Thanks to the cabinet, to the panel members for joining us as well. Thank you very much.